Welcome in once again to Gamecock Central Radio. Emerson Phillips joined by staff writer Collyn Taylor. Will Muschamp held his weekly press conference today. South Carolina coming off this win over Missouri, and the Gamecocks headed home to play their home opener for the 2017 season with the Kentucky Wildcats coming in for a 7:30 kickoff. Collyn, you were at Muschamp's presser today. What stood out to you?
One of the bigger pieces that came out of it was Kyle Markway is going to have surgery, injured a rib against Missouri. And Muschamp said it's going to be about a 6-week process where he'll be out. Obviously, that's big for South Carolina. Markway was a huge part of that special teams unit. Didn't factor in a whole lot over the first 2 games on offense, but it's a guy that looks on special teams, and he's going to be out for a little bit. But other than that, Muschamp said that this team's pretty confident that they want to, going into a Kentucky game, obviously, that means a whole lot to South Carolina in terms of getting back to where they were a couple years ago, and said that this team really wants to win for the seniors just because Kentucky's beaten them 3 straight, and they want to win the game for those seniors like Bryson and Williams that, haven't beaten the Wildcats over their career in South Carolina. But Muschamp said the team's confident, the team's blocking out a lot of noise on the outside about potential sleeper teams and top 25 rankings after the 2-0 start. But the team's confident, and it should be a good game, and Muschamp's looking forward to it, and said they have to run the ball better against Kentucky, or stop the run and run the ball better, 2 things they haven't really done against Kentucky over that 3-game stretch.
Collyn, let's stay with the injury update for just a moment. Fractured rib for Kyle Markway. Muschamp described him as a core special teams guy, and surgery will be required for Markway. And Muschamp commented on Steven Montag as well.
Right, and Montag, who did not travel with the team to Missouri, the coaching staff said that he had a sprained foot, and they are going to evaluate him when they practice tomorrow. They're going to try and let him go tomorrow and see what they have, and decisions are going to be made probably later in the week about if he'll be able to place Saturday or not.
All right, Montag was questionable going into the NC State game. He did play, albeit in limited duty, and did not travel to Missouri.
Right, and you got to think that he's a lot more valuable to you, down the stretch rather than just for one game. And the defensive backs played pretty well against Missouri. They played every snap. So obviously I feel like the coaching staff would like to have a little bit more depth, but they've shown they can make do with what they have. And I think Montag, once you get into the thick of SEC play, is going to be a lot more valuable to you. So you hold him out to save him for those bigger games down the road.
Collyn, I saw on snap count this week that's on Gamecock Central right now that the Gamecocks only use 5 players in the secondary. So Montag would be the 6th, and this is a key player because he can play all the positions in the secondary.
Right, and they really relied on guys like Crystal Mons and Jam Williams, who Mons is obviously a little bit older, but, James, a freshman, they said that he's improving well. He's learning the offense pretty quickly. But they're relying on guys that maybe they haven't seen a whole lot of previously, and, Steven Montag's a guy that they really feel like can help them. So I think, once he comes back, there's going to be a little more depth, especially if a guy, tweaks a hamstring or something like that, knock on wood. But if he can come back healthy and 100%, it is going to be really, really valuable because he can plug a lot of different leaks, a lot of different places.
Will Muschamp's weekly press conference taking place earlier today in Columbia, and he said that the team's got a lot to correct and they haven't played their best game of the year yet. Collyn, he was asked about blocking on kickoff returns 2 weeks in a row. Deebo Samuel has run a kickoff return back for a touchdown 2 weeks in a row. He is the SEC Special Teams Player of the Week, and he was asked about blocking on those kickoff returns, and he mentioned Keel Pollard and Chavis Dawkins by name.
Yeah, and they install an entirely new scheme every week on special teams in terms of blocking to kind of keep the opposing teams on their heels a little bit. But yeah, the blocking's been great, and they use starters on special teams. Muschamp's really hammered home the point that he uses his best players wherever he can put his best players. So guys like, Keir Thomas and Kyle Markway before injury, and Chavis Dawkins and Javon Charleston, those guys are going to play on special teams and are going to block and do those things because they're so good at it, and it helps that it doesn't hurt when you have Deebo Samuel back there making guys miss. And Muschamp said that they rely on that blocking to give Deebo one-on-one opportunities in open space, and more often than not, he's going to win those kinds of battles. And that's kind of what they're hoping to see. the Debo on the kickoff return game.
Will Muschamp press conference review here on Gamecock Central Radio. Emerson Phillips with staff writer Collyn Taylor. If you have not downloaded the Gamecock Central Radio phone app, you can do it now on the App Store and on Google Play. Subscribe to our podcast. Search for Gamecock Central Radio. You'll find us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and other popular services, or just visit radio.GamecockCentral.com. We also want to invite you to take advantage of the new Gamecock Central hotline. You can call in and leave us a voice message on the Gamecock Central hotline. Wes Mitchell will answer your questions about Gamecock football on a future edition of Gamecock Central Radio. Call in, get your Kentucky questions in now, and we will include you on this Saturday's Game Day podcast from Gamecock Central Radio. That phone number is 803-497-9058. It's 803-497-9058. Call in, take part in the Gamecock Central hotline. Collyn, Will Muschamp was also asked about Javon Kinlaw, the young man originally from Goose Creek High School in the Low Country, junior college transfer. I was interested to see, Collyn, that he only played 14 snaps on defense, and he had 2 batted passes in the Missouri game Saturday. He was a key player in that win over Missouri.
Right, and it's hard to miss him when you're on the field. He's so big. We got to talk to him a little bit this morning. He is not small. I mean, I'm 6'2", probably 220, and even he kind of dwarfs me a little bit, just how big he is. And he's a guy that they think can be a major contributor to this defense going forward, especially when he starts to get down to what he said he wants his playing weight at 295. He's 309 right now. But he's a guy they think can, clog up a lot of lanes and take over some double teams, freeing up, maybe Dante Sawyer, Taylor Stallworth, Bryson Allen Williams, and DJ Wanham, free up those guys to go rush the quarterback or stop the run, while he's manning and taking up maybe 2 or 3 different guys on the defensive line. And I think that's going to be his role going forward. And he said he really enjoys doing that.
Muschamp said Kinlaw's role will continue to expand as he plays better. Collyn, weight loss, I think, has been a talking point surrounding Kinlaw, and Muschamp mentioned that he needs to continue to get his weight down. He was 340, Kinlaw was, when he arrived on campus. If I'm not mistaken, you mentioned he's down to 309 now, and they'd like to get him at about 295?
Yep, that's what he said. He said he can do a lot right now. He called himself fat and chubby when he got to campus. But right now he's at about 309, and he can do a whole lot of different things. But said if he wants to maximize his potential, that 295 is probably the way he really wants to stick at. Well,
Muschamp said that Kinlaw is extremely bright, and the head coach has been pleased with him the whole time ever since he arrived on campus. So Javon Kinlaw, a player that a lot of folks in South Carolina knew about before he arrived at South Carolina. There was a lot of interest in him while he was in junior college when the Gamecocks were on him, and he definitely impacted the game Saturday night. So Gamecock fans got to be very pleased with that. Collyn, we were talking about additions to the D-line that could help improve play in that area. That was a concern coming into the year, and Kinlaw's been one of those guys early in the season.
Right, and I think you got to look at Kinlaw and Kier Thomas as 2 guys that have come off the bench, maybe haven't started, but have come in reserve roles and have played well. And from the start as a breather, you always want that second line, maybe not to play up to what the first line's been playing at. And I think both guys have done a really good job of making sure there's no talent drop off when they come into the game for some of the starters.
Collyn, we've talked in weeks past here on Gamecock Central Radio about Muschamp's press conferences, and he's largely down to business. There's not a lot of comedy in his press conferences, but I've noticed that at least once a press conference, it seems, he drops in something lighthearted, and this week he was asked about the some of the new features that will be at Williams-Brice for the first home game of the 2017 season this Saturday night, 7:30 kickoff at Williams-Brice, and obviously new pyrotechnics will be introduced for the 2001 players taking the field, and apparently this new DJ, Collyn, I'm hoping you can fill us in here. Muschamp was asked about the playlist and what it will include. Did he know anything about that? And he said, well, all I can tell you is the playlist will not be my own personal one.
Yeah, and I think he joked that he would be listening to Darius Rucker and Kenny Chesney. He got to pick the music. And not a whole lot of recruits nowadays are listening to, old Hootie and Blowfish frontmen and Kenny Chesney. But from what we know is the DJ is going to be on the sidelines for the beginning of the game and during the game. Muschamp has been pretty vehement in saying that it's not going to interfere anything with what the band is doing. It's just going to be playing when the band's not, and if there's a dull lull during the game, he'll be able to play some music to pick things up, and he'll obviously pick the pregame stuff on the field for the players to warm up to and different things like that to create kind of a different game day atmosphere. I wouldn't say more modern, but more a pregame atmosphere tailored toward the recruits and different things like that.
Young people,
give
right.
them a better sense of what to expect if they come to South Carolina.
Right. I'm not sure Kenny Chesney or Darius Rucker will be a part of the playlist, but probably something upbeat, something with a little attitude, probably with a bass line. Collyn, that would be my guess.
That would be mine as well. Something hip-hop related, something along those lines.
Okay.
So a lot of young people are gravitating over that style of music, so I know I listen to it. It's something that they like to do, and they play a lot of it on the field. Not a whole lot of fans in here, but when players are warming up, there's a big speaker out by the locker room playing that kind of music for the players to warm up to.
That's right.
During the game.
That's right.
So.
Gamecock Athletic Department making an effort to become a little bit more contemporary, if you will. That appeals to recruits and to the young people, students, and players alike. So speaking of recruits, Collyn, huge recruiting weekend for the Gamecocks. A lot of recruits, a lot of prospects will be at Williams-Brice for this game as guests of the University of South Carolina.
Right, and this is massive. I mean, I know a lot of recruits in the Channing Tindall. He won't necessarily announce in September where he's going, but wants to do it pretty soon. And that doesn't leave a whole lot of games for South Carolina to play at home before then. So, if South Carolina can start 3-0 and play a night primetime game on, one of the ESPN family of networks, that's huge. It gets their face out there, and night crowds at Williams-Brice are always something special. And so, recruits that go to the games or see them on TV are going to be able to see that. And it could go a long way in changing some minds of guys that are maybe on the fence about South Carolina.
Collyn, we looked at the schedule before the season started. We knew Kentucky would be a big game because it's the home opener, but I think it's taken on added significance now with the Gamecocks 2-0 start, having 2 wins away from home before this home opener. And also the recruiting angle, a lot of key prospects coming in for this ball game, visiting South Carolina, taking in the atmosphere at Williams-Brice. Certainly that could have an impression or make an impression on these young people who are considering playing their college ball at the University of South Carolina. And another SEC East opponent, Collyn, the Gamecocks beat Missouri last week on the road. If you have any designs on winning the SEC East, you got to be able to take care of business against the likes of Missouri and Kentucky. So you factor all these things into the fact that Kentucky's beaten the Gamecocks 3 straight, and suddenly this Kentucky game feels really big.
Right, and Chris Lamont called it today a measuring stick about where the South Carolina is and evaluating how good they can be this season because they have, historically beaten Kentucky and lost the last 3 to them. This week kind of shows how far they've come over the past year with Muschamp and Jeff Dillman and the assistant coaches. It's massive, I think, just because this is the kind of time where you're going to start seeing the dividends pay off for Will Muschamp and company, and it's going to be important to beat Kentucky because to be able to compete against the Floridas, the Georgias, and the Tennessees of the SEC, you're going to have to beat the Kentuckys, the Vanderbilts, and the Missouris, teams that you should be able to compete with on an every year basis. And I think that's if South Carolina can do that this week, I think they have a chance at competing with Georgia, Florida, and Tennessee based on what we've seen this early start to the season.
We know Kentucky is an improved program. They're 9-3 in their last 12 games. They come in 2-0, but they haven't been particularly impressive in their wins over Southern Mississippi and Eastern Kentucky, and they're going to get a much different atmosphere, as Coach Stoops from Kentucky said earlier this week, when the Wildcats come into Williams-Brice for this 7:30 kickoff on Saturday night. Collyn, we've got a lot of recruiting coverage on Gamecock Central right now. If you want to read up on some of the recruits that will be in town for the game this weekend, you can read about that on Gamecock Central. And we got plenty more Kentucky coverage coming up this week.
Absolutely. Obviously going to focus on some of the guys that have been playing well over the first 2 weekends of the year. Eldridge Thompson, Javon Kinlaw, South Carolina wanting to win this game. Seniors, Bentley talked about that a lot today. And obviously more on Mr. Playmaker himself, Deebo Samuel. Got a lot of stuff going on with him. And then it's the best time of the year because now baseball's starting up again. Fall scrimmages start Friday and Saturday, so we're going to have plenty of coverage on that as well, too. So a lot going on, a lot picking up. So it's going to be a busy week for everybody at Gamecock Central, but we're looking forward to it.
Yeah, fall baseball scrimmage is Friday and Saturday. Those are free and open to the public at Carolina Stadium. So if you want to get to Columbia early, if you're coming in from out of town, you can head over to Carolina Stadium, take in the scrimmage, and then still make it over in plenty of time to tailgate and take in the Kentucky game on Saturday night. Big weekend coming up for Gamecock athletics and particularly Gamecock football. Collyn Taylor, thanks for your time today.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.
Collyn Taylor is our staff writer here on Gamecock Central, and I'm Emerson Phillips. This is Gamecock Central Radio. Thanks for joining us.